Welcome to Secretly Sporty. I am your host, Sebastian Langdell, and I'm joined here with my co-creator, Austin Rackless. Hey, Austin.
Hey, Sebastian. How's it going?
It is good. I just got back from a run. Classes are done for the semester, which is nice.
Congrats on surviving another semester.
Yeah, and it's nice to kind of just figure out, like yesterday it was a run plus like a leg day at the gym. Today is like a run plus like an afternoon swim. It's nice to figure out kind of like a rhythm. How about you? How's your week going?
That was good. I am just back from a wedding that I attended, so I guess my most recent workout was some dancing.
Nice.
I can't say I burnt a lot of calories. I'm more of a swayer, maybe a little shoulder wiggle. But, you know, it was fun to get out there. I had been a little nervous, actually, because this was the first wedding I had attended since I stopped drinking. So I was like, oh, I wonder what this is going to be like. But it was actually completely fine. I had a great time.
What is your like social drink of choice?
I'm a ginger beer fan. So that's probably the favorite. How about you?
I would just have some tonic water with like a squeeze of lemon or lime in there.
That is a good one.
It's got a certain kind of complexity of flavor to it that I enjoy. And I also just like bitter drinks.
I agree, yeah.
Speaking of, bitter non-alcoholic drinks, one that I have been enjoying quite a bit recently is a non-alcoholic Negroni, and they do a mezcal Negroni as well by a company called St. Agrestis, and it comes in these really cool triangular glass bottles, has an awesome logo. I recommend them for sure.
Oh, sounds good. I'll check it out. We can circle back.
Yeah.
But I also thought about our guest this week because I got my haircut and I realized I've really been getting the same haircut since I was 15. And I actually honestly can't imagine getting a different haircut. So, my appearance is very stable is what I'm saying. And our guest today is Brendan Bradley. He is actually a true multi-hyphenate. He's an actor, writer, director, producer, but we primarily talk to him about acting. He has over 100 credits in TV shows, movies, video games, commercials. And he really went into in-depth about how he thinks about his appearance for different roles, specifically how fitness plays into creating that appearance.
Yeah, it was interesting to me, him coming at the question of being in this kind of Marvel superhero shape, coming at it through the fact that he had gotten into that shape in the first place for a role. And so when people started really responding to that and seeing his physique as kind of like the main thing about him, he was uncomfortable with that because that was not something that had been a core part of his identity before that point.
Yeah, he was really introspective about a lot of things, not just his physical practice, but about the importance of silence in his life and the importance of spirituality and the idea of community and connection. This conversation went a lot of different places.
It did, yeah. And we touched on mental health and, as you said, the spiritual side of things, his upbringing. Shall we get into it?
Let's get into it.
Here is Brendan Bradley. Thank you so much for being here, Brendan. We're glad to have you with us today. We like to start by asking about your most recent workout. So what did you do? How'd it go?
My most recent workout would be today, I suppose. Pretty much every morning I go for a swim. And I actually am one of those nerds that tracks things on devices. So I can tell you that I swam 1,500 meters this morning. And I averaged the pace of 133 per 100 meters, minute 33.
And do you do anything beyond swimming, or is swimming the name of the game?
Swimming is my primary right now. I suffered an injury about 10 years ago that has its own little flare-ups now and again in my wrists. So I generally can do like some body weight exercises, a little bit of weightlifting, but primarily for me it's been swimming and also tap dancing for cardio.
Oh, nice. Did you grow up tap dancing, or is this a new pursuit?
I did it in college. I went to NYU for theater.
Okay.
Obviously around a lot of other musical theater people. I love tap dancing, but I was never going to do it on Broadway. I wasn't good. I just enjoyed it. And I think that gave me that relationship of like, oh, I don't dance. I'm not a real dancer. And I kind of stepped away from that for 20 years. And a big thing about the last probably year or two for me is getting back in touch with doing things because I want to.
Yeah.
Just giving myself that permission that I am allowed to like doing things. And so tap dancing is something I've been getting back in touch with, where there's a lovely class of women that are approaching the age of being seniors who I am the worst person in the class, and they let me basically be in the back row flailing and drowning while they all perform brilliantly and amazingly in coordinations.
I'd been in that position before, like in dance aerobics classes and things like that. And in a way, it's kind of cool to have just like a front row seat to an awesome show. And you're doing your best to be part of it, but it's also just fun.
I find it so much fun. And if you can distance yourself from the shame and embarrassment, it's kind of the equivalent of dancing in your kitchen, right? When we're dancing in the kitchen with the headphones on, we think we are nailing it. Like we're just having a blast. Doesn't really matter what our limbs are doing. And in some regard, that's kind of the experience I'm having, because what I see is a brilliant, phenomenal, coordinated tap dance number. But what I am doing is whatever my body is happening to do at that moment.
Right, absolutely. So what does an ideal week of exercise look like for you?
I try to swim most mornings, which basically involves about a half to mile walk there and back. And then I jump in the pool and I basically have a set workout, usually around a mile's worth of swimming. And, it is a community-based pool, so some days the task is just navigating the other bodies that are in the water with you and a little bit of diplomacy in the water. And then other days you walk in and there's no one there. You have a whole lane to yourself. And those are the days you can really, I think, push yourself and try to go to that next milestone, whether that's endurance or pacing or a certain skill set that I'm working on.
Roughly how long per day are you swimming?
It depends on how fast I go, but I'm generally swimming approximately a mile's worth of laps, which can take me anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how many breaks I'm taking. Sometimes I'm doing a lot of kick drills, so those are very my kicking is it has always been terrible, and so the kicking is very slow for me. But yeah, it just kind of depends on what that day's set is.
Do you use one of those kind of bone conducting headsets for music or anything like that?
I am leaving myself alone with my thoughts.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I think we could all use a little bit of that in our lives.
Yeah. You mentioned before that you came to swimming more recently because of wrist injuries, but has it been in your life for a long time?
Yes. I think swimming is probably one of my oldest practices, if not my most frequent practice. I was very bullied growing up, and I didn't really have a lot of community, a lot of friends, and really struggled just academically. Like school was not a great place for me early on. And it turns out that at my school, there weren't enough high school swimmers. So you could get a varsity letter as a 7th grader by doing the swim team, which just meant showing up somewhere at like 5 o'clock in the morning, having your parents drop you off, and getting in a pool and just doing laps. And your existence on the swim team suddenly put you in this classification that, again, makes no sense at all, but looks very impressive to other junior high and high schoolers.
Yeah.
And so effectively, I was able to buy myself status by waking up early in the morning and swimming laps. And it also gave me a sense of like community and protection, because now these older class people felt like, oh, well, we got to take care of Brendan because he's our teammate. But I think it was also very helpful because I had done other sports where I was obviously on a team like soccer and lacrosse and these things. But you were really valued based off of how you played. Like if you couldn't pass correctly or if you couldn't score, your status was determined by that kind of collaborative, how you fit into the machine of the team. Versus swimming is ultimately very independent.
Yeah.
It is about your individual contribution. And so it becomes a sport that is ultimately just about personal best. And so I swam all through high school. And then I had this injury in my late 20s, early 30s, and started getting back into doing laps every day. And that started with me writing my old swim coach in high school and just saying, hey, do you have some like old sets that you used to like train us on? And so I started swimming with those and then started getting into Reddit threads and learning like how other people were getting better at certain skills or what they were focusing on. And again, that personal best nature, the idea that it isn't about anyone but me, I think is extremely helpful in a profession and an industry and an identity where so much of my life is about how I compete with other people and how I relate to other people. And so having something that is truly uninfluenced by anyone else or any other thing in my life is fantastic.
I'm also a high school swimmer. And
what was your stroke in high school?
Freestyle, and I do relays and backstroke. I also went to a pretty small high school, so it sounds pretty similar in terms of setup to you. The barriers to getting on varsity were not high.
Right.
But what I learned, I thought I was a really good swimmer before I joined these teams. And I quickly learned, oh no, these strokes are actually very specific specific. And yeah, I'm not cupping my hands the right way and I'm not kicking the right way. So I kind of had to relearn how to swim in early high school.
I think that's a really interesting thing to touch on overall, is that I think that, at least for me and what I was exposed to, especially early in my life, as a teenager in my 20s, is this idea that like athleticism it's all about doing more of it. It's
Mm,
all about being more intense. Like, I'm gonna do more weight, I'm gonna do more reps.
yeah.
And I think the lesson from swimming, and I think the lesson that hopefully we're starting to bring to fitness in general, is that specificity of form, that specificity of how you do something is actually more important than these metrics that we can maybe put on a more obvious benchmark.
So I had a trainer who was very much of that mindset where he would have you do each motion, each exercise at a relatively low weight for weeks before you would then bump up to the next weight. But what you're doing is you're laying a foundation. You're preventing against injury, and you're not just jumping up to the heavy weights and thinking like, okay, the most important thing is how heavy can I go?
Right. And maybe this is like a little bit of a woo woo against all of society, that like we have these very obvious metrics for like likes and engagement and follows or whatever, but that isn't really what
Yeah.
community is, and that isn't really what connection is. And so like we're starting to have to relearn as a society to use different quantifiers and qualifiers for a practice, whatever that practice is. And in this case, the idea that your fitness is not about how fast you swim or about how
Mm,
far you swim, but is specifically how you are swimming. And that
yeah.
there's actually more value and integrity in that, which is a better lifelong journey, because I would injure myself if all I tried to do was swim more and swim faster.
Right.
But every day I can get more specific. And I
Yeah.
think that that's a really cool way to approach anything, not just fitness.
So what are you working on creatively right now?
I'm an actor, so I'm constantly auditioning, which is just basically the process of I will receive a few pages of material, I will prepare them and tape them on camera for producers, casting directors to consider. Sometimes that goes my way, sometimes that doesn't, which has gotten to be a very kind of isolating experience, because it used to be you'd go in the room, you'd meet people, you'd get redirections and kind of collaborate, and all that has kind of moved to the self-taping phenomenon. So there's a lot
Mm.
less of that relational, community-based part of the industry. And so I've been trying to kind of seek that out in other places. So I have two highly collaborative projects that I'm currently working on. One, I'm writing a play to possibly be done inside of a planetarium, which is about the life of William Herschel and his sister Caroline, who were incredible astronomers in the 1700s and discovered a great number of things. And he was also a composer. So it's kind of mixing his music and his compositions with their real life discoveries. And then I have this long running conversation about artificial intelligence that I started in 2023, where I basically performed in virtual reality and allowed the audience to prompt the environment around me from their smartphones.
Hmm.
It has begun this kind of musical journey with my musical collaborator to kind of explore what is like a 45-minute audio drama musical experience of an artist who starts using AI, and the kind of complicated existential questions of, does that make him an artist? Does that make him a fraud? Does that make him innovative? Does that make him regressing? What is that relationship and that experience?
Amazing. That sounds so cool. My own acting experience kind of peaked and then was discontinued after high school. The most I ever had to do to kind of change for a part is just dye my hair a darker shade of brown.
Uh-huh.
I'm aware that in the real grown up world of acting, you have to go through more monumental changes than that. Can you talk us through what that's like and the role that exercise has played in your journey?
Sure. I think that there's two different types of fitness that are happening with any artist that you're watching in any sort of long running project, whether that's a film that takes place over several weeks or months, or whether that's a play where they're night after night having to get up there and do it. There's the core level of fitness that you need for just sustaining yourself healthily for the run of a project. Everybody is having to kind of put their body through a great deal. They are long hours on set. There's a lot of fast movement, a lot of anxiety and stress. And then there is just the demands of physicality of what you need to do.
Yeah.
Obviously, in stunts, it's very one-to-one. You can say, yeah, if you're going to fall a bunch of times, you need to make sure you're doing that safely. But even just the idea of a walk and talk where you're just fully focused on the mechanics of everybody moving around and making sure no one gets hurt in that environment. It seems so simple and trite, but it is a giant machine that you're just a small cog inside of, and you need to make sure that that cog doesn't break.
Yeah.
And then there's the bands that I think a lot of more audiences are aware of, which is when a role requires you to change your physicality. And I think early in my career, I thought that was about being shredded. It's like, oh, I want to look awesome on camera.
Right.
But I think the grace of maturity and age and time is that I've started to understand that if so much of the work that I'm doing, and not to get too woo-woo about it, but if we go back to like early shamanism and early storytelling traditions and oral traditions, we receive about 70% of our information from this experience from our bodies. It's unspoken. It's just in our presence and our breath, how we hold ourselves and our gait. And so in a lot of ways, there's so much work that you can be doing to tell the story in how you carry yourself, how you hold yourself, and just what muscles are being activated and what tissue is being used for this character. Where does this character lead from? What is this character revealing or hiding? And so I've started to really have a lot more enjoyment in my characters, not so much worrying about whether or not they look attractive on screen, but that they look authentic to the universe and the story that we're telling.
Can you think of a role where you actually had to change quite a bit and, how you decided what that look would be and what you went through?
I think my most dramatic change in the last year or two is there's a film called The Devil and the Daylong Brothers, which is a Southern Gothic musical. It is the weirdest thing I've ever been a part of, and I love it. It's a true independent film in the backwoods of Georgia. It's about a group of brothers that collect souls for the devil. And I like to say that if Tarantino made Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, this is that movie. So if either of those things excite you, this movie is for you. But I play a hillbilly, and so I grew out this thick beard that completely changed, how my face looked. And then I really looked into what would this character have been doing, because he's essentially like a sociopath. I mean, he is a serial killer. Everybody in the world is afraid of him. But I was aware that I was definitely not going to be the most menacing person on set. And I didn't want to put the artifice on of like, oh, I'm really scary, and do something like weird and artificial with myself to kind of like simulate what I thought was scary and menacing. And so I got really deep into what is the truth of this character. And I'm from North Carolina. I've encountered some folk in the Appalachian that live a little off the grid and have kind of different lived experiences than me. And to me, there's this image of someone who is more like a hyena. There's that leanness, that scrappiness, and undeniably that person is strong. Are they muscly and kind of thick? No. And do I think that like a bigger person could kind of handle them in a fight? Sure. But this person has that unspoken advantage of you don't know what they're going to do to get out of a situation. Anything's on the table. Like they might bite you.
Yeah.
And so that rabidness I really wanted to lean into. So I've probably not worked out harder for a role in the sense that I was getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning, well before we were going to arrive on set, and going through essentially a workout that is all about just dropping off as much weight as possible, being just as narrow and sinewy as possible. But then a lot of body weight exercises, a lot of bands, because I wanted those kind of tendons all over his body and that connection of his body. And then I was also dieting very heavily because I wanted him to look a little malnourished, a little underfed, but I wanted to do that in a way that I wasn't malnourished or underfed. So it's kind of strategically pacing my meals. So it's probably the most rigorous I've been to a nutrition plan, in the sense that I was basically like doing those small snacks throughout the day rather than large meals. And then I was just constantly making sure that I was never pumping myself. So I never looked strong or stocky on camera.
I mean, that's got to be fascinating too, because you are looking in the mirror during the filming time and you're seeing this character, right? Especially if you've grown this big beard, you've changed your body in this way. What is your relationship with yourself like? Do you need to like do things to check in with kind of core Brendan, or do you try not to do that so that you can kind of just stay in character for that period of shooting?
I'm definitely not a Daniel Day-Lewis where I'm going to maintain, no one call me Daniel for the entire filming. But for me, even when I am deeply entrenched in the character, there is this genuine, I call it kind of like touching the third rail. There's this energetic shift and alignment, meta triple presence going on of like the reality of the character, the reality of the actor, and then the conversation that's happening between the two of them.
You were saying when you were younger and you were thinking about getting fit for a role and that being kind of just like getting shredded for the role. Can you think back to, your peak fitness in that kind of sense, with that kind of mentality, and how it actually felt? Was it a confidence booster for you, or were you just kind of like tired and hungry the whole time and not feeling great?
It's an interesting question because I think that it really zeroes in on a very specific chapter of my life.
Hmm.
I was a scrappy little skater kid through all of high school and into undergrad, and I got cast in Rocky Horror Picture Show,
Hmm.
which is a musical in which I was playing Rocky, who's kind of like their version of Frankenstein, and he literally gets birthed on stage, and so he's very famously wears only a golden Speedo. And
Right.
I knew the director, and he was like, "Do you think you could get in shape for this? Like, is that something you would want to do?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I've never really like worked out formally, but let me do it. And I started training twice a day, and I put on 20 pounds of just muscle
Hmm.
and got really big for me and was absolutely watching my diet. And my body went through this massive transformation. To your point, I was hungry and cranky all the time. But there was also this really interesting phenomenon where everybody in my life started treating me differently.
Mm.
My classmates, my peers, my castmates in the show. I had an agent that I had just gotten who, had sent me out on a few things, but then she was like having me come into the office and like take off my shirt to show other agents like how ripped I was. Cause it was like, hey,
Okay.
look, we can sell this kid now. Like I very much felt like a product. Like I truly had
Mm.
become a product of what a certain vertical of the industry is about, that pure superficiality.
Mm.
But the personal component of that is that you have literally changed bodies and this isn't a costume anymore.
Hmm.
And it messed me up for a little bit because I suddenly could feel that this thing that was I had never identified with, that was not
Yeah.
who I was, now became the primary identifier. It became the thing that I was classified under.
Yeah.
And that was really tough for me. That was really tough for me.
And so what helped you come out the other side of that?
I mean, I think what helped me, and help is a dangerous word there, is I had to not be successful in
Mm.
that regard, right? I did
Right.
not become famous as a hot guy.
Right.
I think that had I booked the right job, that made me in a certain category of actor, and had that then become my identity, which I think is true for a lot of guys that we see in superhero roles, right? If that's kind of their rise to prominence, and we kind of associate them with a certain amount of physical fitness, it's then hard to alter that, to walk away from that, to gain a healthy relationship with that, because that becomes something that you put on for a role. And now you feel like you have to keep on
Mm.
for your identity and for this kind of persona that you're giving to the world that was never yours to begin with. It was a character's. And so I think it was just, I was fortunate enough, I guess, that for 10 years I worked, but I was never working in a way that my fitness routine or my physicality is what made me successful. And so
Right.
that meant that I could kind of adapt and move around and try on different physicalities rather than feeling like I was baked in to a decision that I had made when I was 19.
One of the roles that has given you quite a lot of screen time and kind of encounter with the public, being a spokesperson for Staples, which is
Yeah.
very much like an everyman role, right? Is that fair?
It's fair, but it goes back to that first conversation that we had about there's the unseen component of there's the fitness of like the embodiment of the character.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole fitness behind having the job, of just doing the
Right.
job. And I don't think it's telling out of class or inappropriate for me to say that my contract specifically had in it that I could not put on or lose more than 10 pounds. And that
Mm.
was essentially that I was becoming a company asset. I was becoming a very specific look and category of who this guy was. And they didn't want me to gain weight, which is, I think, the thing that most people are used to. And they're like, oh, they don't want you to get fat. But there was also, and I think it's equally important to acknowledge, that they also didn't want me to feel like I was going to skim down or I was going to bulk up, or like the goal to them was, hey, we chose you. We like this guy who's a little bit of an everyman, a little bit of a nerd, but like approachable and in this very specific category. And if you go outside of that, you start to change the context of how this guy relates in the world. And so
Yeah.
seeing that not as a rule that was being made for what Brendan could and couldn't do, but just a boundary being put in of you're now representing a company and a character and a universe and a franchise that you need to respect as well. And that's part of the gratitude and the respect of having the job. That's part of my professionalism, not letting my own personal desires, because I would see some of those commercials and I'd be like, like maybe I should just trim up a little, or like, man, maybe I could do a little bit more arm work because I'd love to like fill out that shirt a little more. And that's vanity, that's ego talking versus going like, they gave you the job, man. You've seen how they adjust that name tag. They would not have rolled a camera if they didn't like the way that guy looked. So you got to
Right.
keep being that guy.
Can you think of an especially euphoric fitness memory?
Euphoria is such a great word. Last year, my brother-in-law got a promotion at work, and so he got given a sabbatical, like a paid sabbatical, but they got to choose when it was. And so my sister was working because she's a teacher. All of his siblings were working. And so he called me up and he said, you don't have a real job. Do you want to walk the Camino de Santiago with me?
Wow.
Which is the hike in Spain that is very notorious as kind of like a spiritual awakening. You start in France and you walk over the Pyrenees and you walk across Spain. And there's, I think, 5 main kind of phases or chapters of it. And we did the first 2. We walked roughly, I think, like 200 to 300 miles in 16 days. And you cross through everything from major cities in Spain to small little towns or villages where there's maybe like 4 houses. And I would have thought, like, my brother-in-law, this could have been like a nonstop conversation and inside jokes and pranks and all that stuff. And we did have a great time, I want to be clear, and we had a lot of great conversation. But the majority of the time we were out there, it was just the 2 of us. There wasn't anyone else for miles that we could see on the trail. And we just walked in silence together.
Wow.
And we didn't have music playing. We didn't have a podcast. We just sat there with ourselves. But I think what was fascinating was being in this deeply personal experience with another person in which we were demanding so much of our bodies. There was a mental shift, and they describe this happening, is that as you get into that second phase, the challenge moves from being a physical challenge to becoming a mental challenge. I started to feel that shift, and especially that last week, I think that time with myself, that silence, is the closest I've come to a meditative state. Because I'm not a meditative person. I cannot sit still. I can't sit there alone with my thoughts and close my eyes. I'm constantly thinking about the 20 other things that I could be doing or should be doing. And this is the first time that I think that when people talk about that spiritual sense of capital P, peace, whatever that means to different people, I think it's the closest I've come to that, which I think was a euphoric and pretty remarkable feeling.
Absolutely. You've referenced shamanism and this traditional spiritual pilgrimage side, walking the Camino. Is the kind of spiritual side of things, we've talked a lot about the bodily, but is the spiritual side of things, whether it's in a religious sense or even in the sense of like chi, like energy moving through your body, is that something that you think about a lot?
I don't know that I think about it intellectually a lot, but I think I'm constantly aware of it. I grew up very Roman Catholic, and to the point that it was very prescriptive to me. And so religion, capital R, felt very prescribed to me and very dictated to me. It felt like they were somebody else's policies and rules. So it was hard for me to adopt something that I didn't feel like was mine. But I do consider myself a spiritual person. And I think that part of that is just the unknown. There's so much unknown in the world. There's so much unknown in my own life. And I have to give myself over to that a little bit.
Yeah.
But somewhere within the concept of my upbringing with Roman Catholicism, and that I see in not just Christianity, but a lot of other faith traditions and spiritual traditions, that idea of the Holy Spirit, or this kind of energy between us all, and the fact that it is everywhere. And I think that it is very hard to explain that we are all inherently connected and that we can feel that energy sometimes, that we can feel that space. And I think that space is incredibly precious and incredibly valuable. And I think a lot of what I think about cultivating in my art very specifically is that I can feel it. I can feel when it's working. I can feel when a group of people making a creative project are connected in that intention. And it's an addictive feeling. It's incredible when you touch that third rail and then you don't want to stop. But bringing that into our daily practices as well, I think about all the time. And I think especially about what the world is going through. I think that people are aware that something is fractured in the space between us. We aren't
Mm.
connecting as community anymore. And I think that whatever is on the other side of current state of the world, I think the way towards it, I think the way that we're going to resolve it is by coming back to each other and is by really embellishing in that sacred space that connects us all.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you have some meaningful kind of thought process moments when it comes to silence and existing in silence as well, whether it's swimming laps or your experience on the Camino. But that's something that I've been trying to do more recently, as well as just times when I would otherwise be listening to music, just allowing myself to sit in the silence and let my mind wander or think through what I need to think through and be disconnected in that way.
I love that. And I think disconnected is an interesting choice of words because I think that connection to information feels good,
Hmm.
right? Inherently positive. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I should be informed. I should be educated. I should be caught up. And something that I really recognized a couple years ago was so many of my thoughts. It goes back to actually, weirdly, the conversation about the physicality that I put on in my 20s.
Hmm.
I did that for a role. I did that for a character. That wasn't mine. But then when it was attributed to me and it became mine, it felt like it wasn't for me. And I think that so much of what we're exposed to today, if we always have that headphone in, if we're always consuming other people's thoughts and information, we're not doing the work to make sense of the world from our perspective. And I think that even if those thoughts are unconstructive, and I have many unconstructive thoughts all the time, I think you have to listen to them because in some ways, if they never get heard, they're going to express themselves somewhere else or somehow else,
Right.
which kind of goes back to your like doing the form with the light weights.
Yeah.
It might feel ridiculous to sit there and be like, well, how do I feel about this? But if you don't check in with that, how are you ever going to be able to diagnose what you're hearing or receiving from someone else? And to that, I'll just say one of the most valuable things that I've ever done has nothing to do with fitness, but I started journaling where I just write a single page in a random little moleskin notebook every single day. And it's just stream of consciousness. It's just what I'm thinking about in the moment. It's 5 minutes. But that experience of I'm not sending an email, I'm not
Yeah.
writing some snarky tweet. Like this isn't for anybody. It's just for me to, in the moment, express how I'm feeling about something and connecting it physically to my embodiment. It's
Yeah.
physically writing it out and in many ways purge it. Oftentimes it's unconstructive material or
Right.
information or thoughts that just need to be excised. And once they get excised, I've kind of given them space and room. They've been heard, so they don't need to express themselves in a different way.
We like to end with a lightning round.
Okay.
The first one is cardio or strength training, if you had to choose one.
I think it's going to have to be cardio.
Protein shake or protein bar?
Ooh, protein shake.
Cottage cheese or Greek yogurt?
Froyo? Is that an option?
Option number 3. I like it. It's close enough to Greek yogurt. Yeah. Are you a big Froyo fan?
No, but of the options.
Of
I'm
the
not really a
options.
cottage cheese or a Greek yogurt person.
I like that you didn't just outright decline, but you came up with another option that's maybe a little closer to.
It's my
your
job as an
liking.
actor. I got to give you another option.
Right. Sauna or cold plunge?
Oh, I feel like cold plunge.
You would never find yourself in hell because you're such a nice guy. But if you were in hell, what exercise do you imagine yourself doing?
Let's bring it back to the sauna.
I mean, that's classic hell, isn't it? Just uncomfortable, too hot. How about heaven?
Heaven, let's say, oh, this is so dumb and I'm not following the rules of a lightning round, but like the first thing my mind went to is if I'm an angel, I have wings, which mean I'm like a baby bird that has to learn how to fly and has to strengthen my wings.
It's like, what is the kind of like low weight but like solid form exercise for a new angel? I like this. Would you rather meet your artistic hero or your athletic hero?
Artistic hero.
Peanut butter on a banana or a date?
Oh, banana.
Swim in the ocean or swim in a pool?
Swim in a pool. I used to surf in the Atlantic Ocean and the dolphins would follow you. It was very cool. You'd be surfing with dolphins. But then in my mind, I was thinking, well, then I'm obviously also surfing with sharks. And so in my brain, there's always a shark right there.
I can see that.
Do you ever do the lightning round yourself? At the very least, you owe your listeners like a bonus this podcast where you go, hey, I don't want to lead the witness, but here's what my answers would technically be.
I mean, I have divided loyalties on Greek yogurt and cottage cheese now. There are headlines to be made in those questions for sure. Well, Brendan, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Join us next time as we talk to author Kelly Ramsey about the intense physical training she underwent to become a hotshot firefighter, her trick for running faster, and the song she's making sure her baby daughter hears first. See you then.
We don't need your blessing, we are getting married.
Secretly Sporty was created and is produced by Sebastian Langdell and Austin Rackless. It's hosted by me, Sebastian Langdell, edited by Austin Rackless and Andy Rattinger. Our music is composed by Catherine Joy. Cover art by Ben Wiseman, represented by Illustration Division, Inc. This outro song you're listening to right now is Getting Married by Pocket Radio. Special thanks to Liam Billingham.
We don't need your blessing.
Please note that we are not medical professionals nor personal trainers. Not all exercises are suitable for everyone. Always consult a doctor before starting any new exercise routine or nutritional program. The views expressed in this show are those of the show's creators or the guests, and not those of any other entity or institution.